Imagine standing on the deck of a cruise ship in open water, hundreds of miles from the nearest port, and every light on the ship goes out at once. Not dimmed, not flickering. Gone. No engines, no air conditioning, no water pumps, nothing. For most passengers, that scenario sounds like something out of a disaster movie. But it has actually happened, on a real ship with thousands of people on board. And what unfolded afterward tells you more about how a cruise ship actually works than almost anything else we could cover. Here's what makes this genuinely counterintuitive. A modern cruise ship is essentially a floating power plant. It generates more electricity than most small cities, running everything from propulsion to lighting to water production. Passengers assume that kind of redundancy makes total blackout close to impossible. And in most cases, that assumption holds. Ships are built with multiple independent generators specifically so that one failure never becomes a full shutdown. So the real question isn't whether a blackout can happen, it's what has to go wrong, simultaneously, for a ship with that much built-in redundancy to lose everything at once, and what actually happens on board when it does. Let's put the scale of this system in context. A large cruise ship typically carries 4 to 6 diesel-electric generator sets, each capable of producing several megawatts of power, combining for a total electrical output that can exceed 60 to 70 megawatts, comparable to the power demand of a small city of tens of thousands of people. That electricity doesn't just run lights and elevators. On most modern ships, it directly powers propulsion through electric azipod motors, meaning the engines aren't mechanically connected to the propellers at all. Everything, propulsion included, runs through the same central electrical system. On top of that, the ship needs continuous power for refrigeration holding food for 6,000 to 9,000 people, HVAC systems managing air quality across 18 to 20 decks, and pumps moving both freshwater and wastewater throughout the vessel. Every one of these systems depends on the same source, electricity generated on board, in real time, with no connection to land. Most people assume that if a ship loses power, it simply drifts quietly until help arrives, uncomfortable but essentially safe. That's only partially true, and it misses what actually causes the danger. A blackout isn't just an inconvenience of no lights and no Wi-Fi. Because propulsion, steering, and life safety systems are all electric, a full power loss doesn't just stop the ship, it can also disable the very systems designed to keep people safe and comfortable while help is coordinated. That distinction is the actual engineering problem cruise lines are solving for. It's not, how do we keep the ship glamorous? It's, how do we prevent one failure from cascading into everything failing at once? To understand how this cascade is normally prevented, you need to understand how the power system is structured. The main generators are diesel engines connected to alternators, and instead of powering the ship directly, they feed into a central switchboard system, essentially the electrical heart of the vessel. From there, power is distributed to different zones: propulsion, hotel services, life safety systems. Critically, these generators are physically separated into different compartments, often on different decks or divided by fire-rated bulkheads. This isn't arbitrary. It's a deliberate design principle called redundancy through separation. If one generator room suffers a mechanical failure or a fire, the others, sitting in a physically isolated space, should remain completely unaffected and able to carry the ship's electrical load on their own. Beyond the main generators, ships also carry emergency generators, smaller units positioned above the waterline, in a separate space from the main engine rooms, specifically so that flooding or fire in the primary generator spaces can't reach them. These emergency generators aren't meant to run the whole ship. Their job is far narrower. Keep emergency lighting on, keep some communication systems functioning, keep certain safety pumps operating, and provide enough power to run essential systems until either main power is restored or the vessel is safely evacuated if that becomes necessary. This is the layered defense system. Main generators with physical separation, followed by an independent emergency backup, specifically engineered so that a single point of failure should never be able to take down the entire ship. Now here's where it gets specific to what can actually break that layered defense. If a fire starts inside a main engine room and spreads before it can be contained, it can damage multiple generators that happen to be adjacent, even if they were meant to be independent systems. Suppression systems are designed to stop this. But suppression buys time. It doesn't guarantee zero damage. If enough of the main generation capacity is lost simultaneously, the emergency generators activate. But they were never built to replace full ship power, only to sustain minimum safety functions. This is the exact mechanism behind a real, documented event. In February 2013, the cruise ship Carnival Triumph suffered an engine room fire that knocked out its main power generation while the ship was in the Gulf of Mexico. Emergency generators activated as designed, providing minimal lighting and limited essential systems, but they could not power full HVAC, cooking equipment, or the vessel's sewage and wastewater pumps at normal capacity. With more than 3,000 passengers on board, this meant days without reliable air conditioning in extreme heat, backed-up plumbing on multiple decks, and food service reduced to whatever could be prepared with minimal power. The ship was without propulsion, so it had to be towed back to port. Nobody was in danger of sinking, and the emergency systems performed exactly as engineered, keeping people safe. But safe and functional turned out to be two very different things, and that gap is what passengers actually experienced for several days. This is the edge case that defines the entire system's real limitation. Emergency generators are a safety net, not a substitute for the ship's full electrical infrastructure. They're sized and positioned to preserve life safety functions, lighting, some communications, minimal pumping, not comfort systems like air conditioning or full-capacity plumbing. When main power is lost for an extended period, passengers don't experience a movie-style catastrophe. They experience a much slower, more uncomfortable failure. Rising cabin temperatures, unreliable toilets, limited food options, and a ship that can move only when towed or once partial power is restored. The actual danger to the vessel is usually low. The actual disruption to daily life on board can be severe. Since that incident, cruise lines have made specific engineering changes in response. Backup systems for sewage and ventilation have been reinforced on many vessels, additional emergency generator capacity has been added on newer ships, and fire suppression protocols in engine rooms have been tightened industry-wide. This is a pattern you'll see across marine engineering generally. Real incidents expose the actual gap between the system is designed for this and the system was tested by this, and future designs close that specific gap. So a total power blackout on a cruise ship isn't really about darkness. It's about which systems are protected by design, and which ones were never meant to survive a worst-case scenario in the first place. The generators, the physical separation between engine rooms, the emergency backup system, all of it exists because the ship's own electricity is the single point every other system depends on. When that foundation is disrupted, the ship doesn't fail all at once. It fails in exactly the order its safety systems were built to allow: safety first, comfort last. So it's not the size of the ship or the number of backup systems on board that determines what happens in a blackout. It's the specific hierarchy of what those systems were actually designed to protect and what they were never meant to replace. But losing power at sea is only one version of a system failing under pressure. What happens when the ship's stability itself is pushed past its limit? I've already broken that down in another video.